Today, we're diving into the story of a perfect enemy, a pathogen that has become one of the most feared superbugs in hospitals all over the world, Acinetobacter baumannii. We're going to break down exactly how this tiny organism became such a massive threat.
And to really get a sense of the stakes here, let's just start with this quote. It gets right to the heart of the problem. We're not just talking about a bacteria that's tough to treat. We're talking about something that can literally evolve to defeat every single drug we have.
So, how did Acinetobacter get such a terrifying reputation? Well, it all starts with where it lands on the list of the world's most dangerous pathogens.
Acinetobacter is a key member of a notorious group of bacteria known by the acronym ESCAPE. As you can see, these are basically the sixth most wanted pathogens, the ones most famous for, well, escaping the effects of our antibiotics and causing absolute chaos in hospitals.
The threat is so real that the World Health Organization has put certain strains of Acinetobacter on its critical priority list. Now, these are the ones resistant to carbapenems, which are some of our most powerful last resort antibiotics. So when a bug can resist those, it's a massive red flag. This listing is basically a global SOS, telling us we urgently need new drugs to fight this thing.
Okay, so to fight this enemy, you have to understand its weapons. And as we're about to see, Acinetobacter doesn't just have one trick up its sleeve, it has an entire arsenal. Let's start at level 1, multi-drug resistance, or MDR. This means the bacteria can shrug off antibiotics from at least 3 different classes of drugs. That's a serious problem, but believe me, this is just the warm-up act.
Then you level up to extensively drug-resistant, or XDR. At this point, doctors are really starting to sweat. The bug is resistant to almost everything in the pharmacy, leaving maybe 1 or 2 options left on the table. The playbook is getting very, very thin.
And that brings us to the final boss level, the absolute nightmare scenario, pan-drug resistance, or PDR. This is exactly what it sounds like. The bug is now resistant to every single licensed antibiotic we have. It is quite literally a therapeutic dead end.
And if you're thinking this is some distant future threat, take a look at this. This chart shows just how fast the problem is exploding. In the US, resistance to those critical carbapenem antibiotics more than doubled in under a decade. This isn't on the horizon, it's already here. So how on earth does it do this? Well, it has this incredible bag of tricks. First, it makes these enzymes that act like molecular scissors, just chopping up our antibiotics before they can do any harm. Then it can actually change the gates on its own cell wall to physically block the drugs from ever getting inside. And if an antibiotic molecule does manage to sneak in, it has these tiny pumps that act like bouncers, grabbing the drug and literally throwing it right back out.
You can imagine this amazing ability to defend itself creates a huge challenge for doctors on the front lines. The decisions they have to make are anything but straightforward.
A doctor finds Acinetobacter in a patient's sample. Now they have to answer this critical question. Is this bug just a harmless bystander, just colonizing the patient? Or is it an active, deadly invader causing a life-threatening infection? Getting that call wrong has massive consequences.
And telling the difference is absolutely crucial. See, colonization just means the bacteria is present, but it's not actually making the person sick. If you treat that with antibiotics, you're just breeding more resistance for no good reason. But an infection, especially when you find the bug in a place that's supposed to be totally sterile, like the bloodstream, well, that's a 5-alarm fire that requires immediate action.
To help make that tough call, doctors look for clues, these key risk factors. Patients who've recently had surgery, are on a ventilator, have a central line, or have spent time in the ICU, all of them are at a much, much higher risk of having one of these dangerous, resistant strains.
So what happens when it's a confirmed severe infection? Well, that's when doctors have to reach for their last lines of defense.
The strategy is very methodical. First, figure out how sick the patient really is. Second, you have to know your enemy. Get that resistance profile. Third, for the really serious infections, you hit it hard and fast with a combination of different antibiotics. And then if the patient starts to improve, you can de-escalate or scale back to a single more targeted drug.
Now, the drugs themselves are split into 2 tiers. You have your first-line agents. These are the safer, preferred options for bugs that are still susceptible. But when you're facing a highly resistant strain, you're forced to use the second-line agents, like an old drug called colistin. And these can work, but they come with a price. They can be highly toxic and have a much bigger risk of serious side effects, like kidney damage.
For those really tough, scary infections, using that cocktail of multiple antibiotics is absolutely essential. The logic is simple, right? By throwing a few different drugs at the bug at once, you dramatically increase the odds that at least one of them will work. And studies show this approach actually saves lives.
But what happens when you're facing one of those pan-drug-resistant strains? This quote from our source material reveals the terrifying reality. When every drug we have fails, the data runs out. Doctors are left navigating in the dark. The best way forward is simply unknown.
And this leads us to what is maybe the most important point of this entire story. If we can't always treat it, we absolutely must prevent it. The most powerful weapon we have in this fight isn't a new drug.
Why is prevention so critical? Look at this number, 33%. A huge review found that the overall death rate from Acinetobacter infections is a staggering 1 in 3.
And if the strain happens to be resistant to those powerful carbapenem antibiotics, the danger skyrockets. The risk of death is more than double what it is for infections from non-resistant strains. This proves it. Resistance kills.
So, what is the answer? It's surprisingly low-tech, but it works. The best defense is aggressive cleaning, strict, and I mean strict, hand hygiene for healthcare workers, isolating patients who carry the bug, and being incredibly careful and sterile when handling medical devices.
Which leaves us with this final, lingering thought. We are in an arms race against an enemy that is constantly evolving, and our most powerful drugs are beginning to fail us. Is it possible that our most basic, fundamental practices of hygiene and infection control are no longer just our first line of defense, but are becoming our last and maybe even our only hope?